ones are cracked. These are bad.
Yeah.
I'm coming down now. Not if anyone needs. Nah. Dead. On me.
Is that mine?
Yeah.
Oh, damn. What is up, guys? It is Extra Troy, and today is my review of the Pulsar x2f prototype. Now, nothing about this mouse is final. Everything is subject to change, including the weight, the shape, the clicks, the sensor. Literally everything about this mouse can change, but this is what I wanted my review of it to be. Now, I have a bunch of other different mice here to compare it to, and today I also want to get into the 3 different types of grip styles that you could use whenever you're using a mouse, and why I believe fingertip and the Pulsar x2f prototype is one of the best mice that you can get. Without any further ado, let's jump into it. So up first, you have palm grip. Now, palm grip is kind of the oldest type of grip that there is. It is the most controlled, the most stable grip, and here I have 2 ergo mice to kind of demonstrate my purposes. First, I have the G Pro X Dex, and then I have the Lamzu Thorn. Now, the Lamzu Thorn is the one that I've put the most time onto in terms of ergo mice, so it's what I'm going to be using. But as you can tell, it has a very asymmetrical profile. There's a high ridge right here, and then a lower part right here, a lot deeper of a curve on this side than there is on this side. And obviously the point of that is so you can get your thumb in and it kind of supports your palm and the top underneath your knuckles the most. That way, whenever you're sitting there aiming and everything, you have the most stability, you have the most control, and it's just an overall very controlled experience. Now, these mice are good for games like CSGO and Valorant, where you're not doing a lot of crazy vertical movements, you're not doing a lot diagonally, everything that you're doing is relatively just horizontal, and so in those games it makes the most sense to have the most control, the most stability. However, for games like Apex, Overwatch, Fortnite, games where you do need to calculate for those different types of movements, an ergo mice is not necessarily the best for that because it does not allow for the most in-hand maneuverability. It's really good for keeping things on a nice line, but whenever it comes to a lot of fast, quick motions, typically speaking, I have a lot of difficulty with this just because of how much of the hand the mouse fills up. Now, that brings us to our second category, claw grip mice. Now, claw grip mice are kind of the next step up whenever it comes to speed and control. Here I have the Viper V3 Pro and the XM2W 4K. Both of these mice right here are what I would consider the most quintessential types of claw grip mice. They hit in the back of your palm the same way a palm grip mouse would, but they have a very steep and very quick drop off from the mid hump onwards. That way, in your hand, you can still get a bit of maneuverability. Now, it's not as much as something like a fingertip mouse, but this is kind of the next in between because, like I said, it still allows you to have support, nice control in those horizontal movements, but because the top is symmetrical and it's also not as high profile, it then allows you to use your fingers and not be obstructed by something like a high hump on the side. And so, this is why these are the most popular mice out there, is because they allow for the most wide range of motion, they allow for the most control / movement in most games, and typically most gamers are using something like a V3 Pro, like a XM2W, like a GPX. All those types of mice best suit kind of the general broad spectrum. However, they are not as controlled as something like a palm grip mouse, or as fast as something like a fingertip mouse. And that brings us to fingertip mice. Now, these right here give you the most in-hand maneuverability, the most speed whenever it comes to your flicks and your vertical movements, but they have the least stability out of all of the mouse grips and all of the mouse types because there's none of that back to put your palm on. Obviously, it's all for your fingers. There's nothing hitting the top of your knuckle. There's nothing hitting the back of your palm. It is only your fingers using these mice. Hence, you have the least amount of stability. And that's why, like I said, I would consider these the fastest. Then you have your regular palm grip slash claw grip mice, and then you have your full palm grip mice. Each of these kind of vary one bit of the spectrum. You have the most control but least speed, you have the in-between, and then you have the most speed with the least control. And that brings me to the x2f prototype from Pulsar. Now, Pulsar is the first out of the main companies to sit here and make a fingertip mouse. Obviously, Razer doesn't have one, Logitech doesn't have one, In-Game Gear doesn't, Lamzu doesn't. None of the main manufacturers out there have a fingertip mouse, which begs the question of why. And I believe there is an untapped market right here. This, in my opinion, is the best fingertip mouse that I've ever used. Before I got this, I was using the Shark M5, and don't get me wrong, this is also a nice mouse. It's very lightweight, very tactile clicks, very easy to spam buttons, and it has a good sensor. However, it doesn't necessarily have the best, most premium feeling, and that is where Pulsar, and of course their higher tier of manufacturing and their higher tier of mouse knowledge kind of come in. Now, there are 500 of these that were sent out to reviewers. I got number 251, and my experience with this has been almost nothing but perfect. Once I got kind of the sensor figured out, because there's no software for this, so I had to use a combination of button presses, kind of like you have to do on a Vaxi mouse. And once I got the firmware and all that stuff sorted out, I've put multiple hours on this. I probably have about 80 to 100 of it now, and I've had this mouse probably for a little under a week, and I honestly can't get over it. Now, there are some differences compared to something like their X2H here, and I grabbed this mouse because this is kind of like the most polarizing comparison that you can make. The Pulsar X2H has the high back hump to help support for claw grip and things like that, and obviously the X2F has none of that. And so, most of the other features are relatively the same. They have kind of the same button height, kind of the same width. Everything except for the back of the mouse is the difference. And so, that being said, the X2H is obviously really good for claw grip and being able to have that in-palm stability, whereas the X2F is really good for that in-hand maneuverability and that overall speed that I was kind of talking about. Personally speaking, I would have preferred the weight to be a little bit lighter. The Shark M5 comes in at about 35 to 37 grams, and I feel like that right there is definitely a bit more of a weight that I would go for, because this feels very well built. This feels very nice and solid. There's not really any, if at all, build quality issues that I have. Nothing on this really flexes, but it still feels kind of dense. And so I think if they were able to shave off maybe 5-10 grams from that weight, I think it would be really good. The stock skates are also pretty good. I haven't swapped them out yet, and on all of these mice I have Jades or Obsidian Pros or something, because I primarily use the Wallhack SB004, but honestly these stock skates, they've held up pretty well, so I haven't had any reason to try and swap them out. The clicks are good. Personally speaking, I would have tried to go for an optical switch, maybe like an Omron optical or something like that would suit my preferences more, just because the Trinity CF and the Lamzu Maya have my favorite clicks out of any mouse that are out there, closely followed by the KLGXs for the XM2W and the OP1W 4K, which is right here. Those are the types of clicks that I prefer, and now these are very light, very spammable, very easy to actuate. However, I think if you were to lower the weight of the mouse, you would also need to sit there and lower the actuation force. Right now it works because the mouse does feel kind of dense, and the clicks, they kind of help in that same category. It's not like the mouse is light and the clicks are heavy. It's not like the clicks are light and the mouse is heavy. They both kind of are in the same bracket, and I would like to see it a bracket lower in terms of weight and click force actuation. However, besides that, I mean, that's not like a difficult thing to change. You can literally just take them out. So besides that, everything else has been really good. I like the coating on this test unit. It's been pretty good. Typically speaking, I have really sweaty hands, so something like an In-Game Gear or something like a Lamzu / Razer coating is what I tend to lean to, because on other mice, like for example the Shark M5, this is a very slippery coating, and it's very hard for me to sit there after a long time using it and still have a good grip. So something like the Pulsar X2F's coating, it's honestly probably really solid. I haven't had any issues with it, no grip tape required, nothing like that. And in terms of the sensor and everything, it's been pretty good. Like I said, once I got the firmware and all that stuff sorted out, it was good. The battery life has been really good. I've charged this thing like once and it's still kicking. So that's pretty solid. I've been running this at 2k hertz polling rate, so I haven't really been using it at the full capacity of the 8000 hertz polling rate, but I mean, most games that I play don't really support that. In terms of the side buttons, these are pretty solid side buttons. I personally don't use side buttons any more than like a ping or like to activate voice chat, so side buttons aren't necessarily something that's super high up there on my list, like the Demo Shark M5 Pro. I mean, you can hear these aren't necessarily the best side buttons, and even on the Viper V3 Pro, these have really good side buttons, but for me personally, it doesn't make a difference because I never use them anyways. So for me, a mouse is always about mouse 1 and mouse 2 and how well I can aim with it. Now, like I said, this mouse does feel a bit dense, so I would shave off a few grams of the weight, and in doing that, I would also probably try and lighten up the clicks. But besides that, I mean, the scroll wheel is good. Very easy, very satisfying, very easy to actuate. I like scroll wheels like this because typically I have like a weapon swap or a jump or something like that bound to it. So if I can feel the individual notches, that makes it easier for me to kind of unconsciously be aware of, am I on gun 1? Am I on gun 2? How far do I have to scroll in order to swap to this thing, you know, etc. And obviously, the click is also very easy to actuate. Now, like I said, the side buttons, they are pretty good. They're very wide. I mean, these side buttons right here are basically the regular side buttons, just kind of smushed together and a little bit shortened, but they still feel pretty good. They're not like the widest implementation. If you look at something like the Dex, you can see there's quite a big difference in the size of the side buttons, but I mean, it's a fingertip mouse, and compared to obviously my other fingertip mouse, there is a pretty big difference there. So far, I really like this mouse. And honestly, even though it is a prototype, and like I said, everything here is subject to change, but even though it is a prototype, if they were to release this as it is, I think it would do pretty well. I just want to put it out there though, I absolutely love the design and the aesthetic of this thing. I love like the little text here, the lines here on each of the clicks, the text here, the little boxes here. Everything about this, I love. This suits that like off-white kind of tech wear, futuristic cyberpunk style that none of my other mice do. And honestly, half of the reason that I wanted to try this mouse was just because of how it looked. So personally speaking, I would not change the design. Now I know that whenever the actual mouse comes out, it probably will be, but honestly, I'm a sucker for the way this mouse looks. But yeah, that has been my review of the Pulsar x2f prototype. Make sure to leave your thoughts in the comments, and I will talk to you guys later.